Thanks for staying with us. The High Commissioner of Trinidad and Tobago in Nigeria, Yohuma Metinhotep Obika, has asked Nigeria's House of Representatives to move for the observation of the Emancipation Day in Nigeria. The Emancipation Day, connoting the post-slavery era, is observed by Africans and blacks all over the world on August 1 every year.
Almost 500 million Africans in the diaspora, okay? And it is there, they're just there, you know? So this is an ideal opportunity for us to work together to address that. And this year, in fact, 2012 is considered to be the year of the Mayans.
I think this committee should work with the African Union to ensure that the AU sets aside August 1st every year as Emancipation Day for every African country, because this is something that will be beneficial to all of us, and we can, if we understand where we're coming from, we'll know where we're going to.
Emancipation Day affords blacks to reappraise the journey from the slavery era to the post-slavery era and draw from the lessons. The Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, the Center for Democracy and Development, and the Zero Corruption Coalition have accused the Senate committee investigating alleged corruption in the pension sector of lack of transparency in its handling of the matter. The group, in a press release, said there are indications that the Senate committee has failed to thoroughly scrutinize all the details presented to it by the Abdul-Rashid Maina-led Pension Reform Task Force team, but instead providing cover for the people indicted for feeding phantom pensioners' entitlements. The civil society groups therefore called on the Senate President to redeem the image of the Senate and immediately dissolve the committee and replace its members, which they believe have been compromised. The civil society groups are particularly concerned about the lack of sincerity on the part of the committee to get to the root of the pension scam of billions of naira, and have encouraged the House of Representatives to be open and transparent in its planned investigation into the pension scam and ensure that the culprits are brought to face the wrath of the law. The intelligence gate in Banki town of Borno State, housing the Nigerian Immigration Customs personnel and some intelligence operations, was attacked on Tuesday night by suspected terrorists. The suspected assailants shot sporadically and burned the gate, including unconfirmed numbers of rifles and private vehicles in the area. Attempts to burn a police station in the area was, however, repelled by the police in the attack that left in its wake about 7 civilian and an immigration officer casualty. A saloon car and 2 AK-47 rifles allegedly used by the attackers were recovered by the police. Police in Borno State say the situation has been brought under control and normalcy restored to Banki town. Governor Leo Moke of Cross River State has condemned the Easter Day bombing in Kaduna, north-central Nigeria. Governor Imoke, who described the action as barbaric and wicked, enjoins Nigerians and indeed friends of Nigeria to rise up and support the security agencies to tackle this evil act. The governor, who is also the chairman of the South-South Governors Leaders Forum, charged Nigerians to believe in themselves with the hope that better days are ahead. He said the government at all levels is poised to address all burning issues and challenges confronting the nation, but will only succeed with the cooperation and support of the people. The South-South Governors and Leaders Forum chairman announced the meeting of the forum comprising the governors of Bayelsa, Rivers, Delta, Edo and Akwa Ibom states, including Cross River State, will meet in Uyo, the Akwa Ibom state capital, on Friday on a yet-to-be-revealed agenda. He said those expected at the meeting also include all National Assembly members, speakers of the 6 state houses of assembly, among others, are to attend. President Goodluck Jonathan has commended late Hajia Aisha Abubakar's commitment to the welfare needs of the less privileged in her community. In a condolence message sent to Inspector General of Police Mohammed Abubakar, President Jonathan described late Hajia Aisha Abubakar as a devout Muslim whose death death news was received with shock. The acting Inspector General of Police mother died in an Egyptian hospital on Wednesday after a brief illness. All right, that's Inside Nigeria. Kakaki will continue in a moment. When we come back, it will be time for our interview segment. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Now, catch the ball. Nobody came to play. Even today.
What happened?
Nobody came to play. I think everyone is ill.
When Harmattan comes, it brings sudden weather changes, cool mornings, hot during the day, with haze, with lots of dust everywhere, spreading germs even faster amongst us. That's why, especially in Harmattan, my family bakes daily with Dettol.
Mom, I'm waiting!
Dettol gives maximum protection against germs, so that they can embrace the season without giving me worries. If I don't take care of him in Harmattan, who will?
Hello Nigeria! Today we use this tablecloth to put area to a tougher challenge. We'll use soup with oil. Wash 20 clothes in 2 pieces. Wash one with regular powder and the other with Ariel. As Ariel cleaned in 1 wash and regular powder, let's give regular powder a second chance. And after a second wash, so who wins the 1 wash challenge? Brilliant cleaning in 1 wash.
My kitchen needs to be safe from germs, so after I finish cooking, I clean all the surfaces and the floor with Dettol, and that keeps my home healthy as it should be.
Every day, the nation's #1 antiseptic helps Nigerian families fight germs in many ways.
What does your Dettol do for you?
Okay, now catch the ball. Nobody came to play. Even today.
What happened?
Nobody came to play. I think everyone is ill.
When Harmattan comes, it brings sudden weather changes, cool mornings, hot during the day, with haze, with lots of dust everywhere, spreading germs even faster amongst us. That's why, especially in Harmattan, my family bakes daily with Dettol.
Mom, I'm waiting!
Dettol gives maximum protection against germs, so that they can embrace the season without giving me worries. If I don't take care of him in Harmattan, who will?
Welcome to Royal Tropicana Hotels, the best amongst the best. We have the most conducive environment and services. We drowse your stress after a hectic day and provide the most affordable and flexible services. Ours is providing first-class hotel and catering services, second to none booster of tourism development in Nigeria. Our facilities include rooms from standard to premier suites, conference hall, swimming pool, security-tight parking space, 24-hour power supply, banqueting facility, and we give you royal treat in our modern restaurant. We also provide what others cannot, such as vegetarian meals, outdoor meals, and international standard snacks. Royal Tropicana Hotels are at your service whenever you are in Kano, Kaduna, Lagos.
Our contacts are Kano Kaduna, Lagos. For reservations and booking, call, email, website, Royal Tropicana Hotels. It's our pleasure.
I never compromise on the hygiene of our clothes. Dettol in laundry water keeps them not just clean, but also 99.9% germ-free.
Every day, the nation's #1 antiseptic helps Nigerian families fight germs in many ways.
Dettol does the magic for me. What does your Dettol do for you?
Hello Nigeria! Today we use this tablecloth to put area to a tougher challenge. We'll use soup with oil. Wash 20 clothes in 2 pieces. Wash one with regular powder and the other with Ariel. Has Ariel cleaned in 1 wash? And regular powder? Let's give regular powder a second chance. And after a second wash. So who wins the 1 wash challenge? Ariel, brilliant cleaning in 1 wash.
A very good morning to you, and of course, you know, it's still Kakaki, the African voice, and it's time for our interview segment this morning. We've been talking about, derivation, talking about revenue allocation and true federalism. Now, in 1954, when Sir Arthur Richards established Nigeria's 3-region federal structure, a commission headed by Sir Louis Sheikh was set up the same year to work out a revenue allocation formula.
The commission recommended that the total revenue available to Nigeria be allocated in such a manner that the principle of derivation be followed for the purpose of meeting the needs of the central government and ensuring the development of states. The derivation principle was therefore incorporated in the 1954 Federal Constitution, which was operated until 1958.
Now, in 1958, another commission headed by Jeremy Reisman submitted a revenue allocation report which recommended that emphasis should be placed on population, which it regarded as the approximate index of financial need.
That report also emphasized basic responsibilities of the regions and the need for even development of the country. This recommendation was taken and incorporated into the pre-independence federal constitution. That is, derivation was played down and population played up in the amount of revenue held back by the regions as they paid rent to the central government.
Rent indeed, Tsunami. Now, the Independence Constitution therefore respected derivation but made population a determinant factor in what the regions paid the center and what they retained.
The 1966 coup and the attempt by the Aguiyi-Ironsi administration to create a unitary government which collapsed resources at the center was resisted, and in July 1966, a counter-coup led by Yakubu Gowon reversed the unification decree and restored the federal structure with its resource allocation formula.
Well, we wonder if it was truly restored, but because of the need by the federal government to prosecute the civil war, and because all legislation for the whole country was being done by the military government at the center, revenue allocation formula provided in the federal constitution was not respected.
This was the situation until 12 states were created. Resources meant for the 4 regions were simply subdivided for the emerging states. The federal government still retained its share, thus getting stronger while the states got weaker financially.
In 1968, the Gowon administration set up an interim revenue allocation committee headed by Chief I.O. Dino, which in 1969 recommended that allocation to states should take cognizance of the needs of states. Now, it also discarded the control of resources by states and instead recommended a 10% allocation for derivation instead of 50% contained in the Independence Federal Constitution.
Indeed, since then, revenue allocation, distorted fiscal federalism and indices for determining resource allocation have remained major issues till date in Nigeria.
Well, recently the central bank governor Sanusi Lamido Sanusi wondered whether the Boko Haram violence, which seems domiciled in the north, is not a result of the lopsided distribution of Nigeria's revenue, which has put the north at a disadvantage. Then the Northern Governors Forum called for a review of the present revenue formula because they say it leaves the north marginalized beside giving to the Niger Delta states what does not belong to them in respect of oil produced offshore. Now, these arguments have drawn reactions and raised a debate over revenue allocation in Nigeria's federal structure. This is the issue we will be examining today, and joining us in the studio are Kenny Okolubo, political analyst, politician. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Very good morning to you. And we have Honorable Mohammed Shamsidin Ango Abdullahi, representing Giwa Biringwari Federal Constituency of Kaduna State. Welcome, sir. Very welcome. And we have Rima Shawalu, journalist, board member, Niger Delta Development Commission. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Welcome. All right, so let's start from the outcry of the Northern Governors Forum that the revenue allocation formula presently does not favor that region, and the fact that the governors believe that if the North must develop, then more must be accrued to it, you know, based on its population. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I think it was the Niger State governor that made the first statement. I wouldn't say the Northern Governors Forum has actually endorsed that position. I don't think they have endorsed that position of saying that the resources that are coming to the Niger Delta states are too much. I think it's a take that started from the Niger, I mean, he's the chairman of the Governors Forum.
Exactly.
And I don't know if he made that statement in his personal capacity or he made that statement as the chairman of the Northern Governors Forum. But be as it may, what we have to say here is, I'm from the Niger Delta, I'm from Delta State, for example. If we're to go back, I'm happy you went through history, because I also read political science. If we're to go back to the 1960 Constitution, which was again changed in 1963, which the difference only was because the Queen of England had been stripped of her powers, it was very clear that as at that time, 50% was actually being paid to the regional units of the country. And why it was being done then was, before now what we had was regional boards. You make your money and you pay to the center, like you rightly said it. And we, all wisdom and in all sincerity of purpose, we had the 1979 Constitution, we had the 1989 Constitution, and we also had the 1999 Constitution. But after the lopsided arrangement was done in terms of what was going to the areas where we're getting the derivatives from, we forgot that there was a time we had cottons, we had hide and skin, we had granules, pyramids, and we had cocoa in the southwest that was earning a lot of income for those regions. But once oil was discovered, a lot of these regions became very lazy and only depended on the oil revenue. And you see, the height of this issue is the correlation between the topic you have brought today is those of us from the Niger Delta feel very shortchanged at even the 13% we're getting from the federal government. And I'm sure before now you would have heard of resource control that said 25%. But after 25%, we said what we should be getting is 50%, because if you're looking at it basically, 95% of our income comes from oil. The exports ratio of other cash crops are almost negligent. We don't hear it from what the exports board comes to give us at every year's budget. And so, and we also understand that there is no region, without being immodest to my northern brothers, or the northern region, there is no region in the north that has discovered oil. And so if you're bringing oil from my place, for example, and you are actually saying that what we are getting in terms of derivation, when we know that when we were in regional units, we were actually making this money and we're paying to the center, I mean, I think it's most unfortunate here.
So, in other words,
yes,
what you're saying is that the call for the increase in allocation to the northern parts of the country is absolutely not necessary. It is
absolutely unnecessary. They should rather be saying they should be giving us the 50%. I mean, he who pays the piper dictates the tone. It is very clear. But that is not saying that the northern parts of the country should not be developed, because I mean, when we were brought together in 1914, in all the wisdom of the British government, remember we're protectorates, and when you have a protectorate, you cannot go into agreement with a foreign company, a foreign nation, without the approval of Britain. And by the time we got independence, we should have used our wisdom to know that bringing us together, we're bringing up, I mean, when you bring strange fellows, do you understand, together, there are certain issues that you cannot marry. It's just like in a relationship. You understand? You can reconcile your irreconcilable differences. But you see, it's managed in such a way that there are certain sentiments that are being brought up here. Like what you said, the governor of Central Bank said, I think that was, I mean, for his position, I think that was not responsible. Because for his position, I'm saying, if he was saying it in his personal capacity, one can actually take it. Because if you go out there in the Niger Delta and see what is happening there, I'll use my a region, for example. I come from the Okwani region. We have power from Okpai, which is in Ndokwa Federal Constituency. We generate 450 megawatts of power from that IPP in Okpai. And that was the only IPP that Obasanjo commissioned. And I'll tell you that today, it is not stepped down in that area, in that environment. If you see the difference between where the RG people stay and where those from my constituency stay, it's a far cry. You will not even believe that it is less than 1 meter from each other. And you know, these same people would imagine that this power is transferred to Bosi, step down to the national grid, and they make and money is being made by PHCN.
All right. Let's get to...
Kenny, you've spoken quite extensively.
I haven't been too passionate about
well,
it.
It's okay. Passion is allowed. It's part of it.
Yes.
Rima, I go over to you. Now, he's spoken about, in fact, having more allocation to the Niger Delta and, you know, saying that his northern counterparts, well, more allocation to them are totally unnecessary. Now, the northern states are saying that they're marginalized. In fact, they're calling themselves, or they refer to the situation as endangered species. Now, we look at that and we ask the question, if the northern states are saying that they have more local governments and because of that they need more allocation, and Kenny here is saying that, oh, they actually need more allocations because, of course, the oil is produced in their land, and most of the people, if you look at the comparison in livelihood between the people who are producing and the residents of the state, it is a far cry. What's your take on that?
Well, two things, quick things. In the first place, I do not think that it is correct for the central bank governor to say that Boko Haram and related problems are a result of revenue sharing. It is not historical. It is not correct, because Mitatsini, the burning of churches, the killings of people, the bombings that are going on, and the Mitatsini, the various crises that we've had in the past have nothing to do with revenue sharing. Fact is, look at everywhere in the world. Oil is not the only thing that makes communities prosperous. You can even go further to ask, how many oil wells does Bill Gates have? The people that are rich, the regions that are rich, how many oil wells do they have? How many oil wells does South Africa have? South Africa is one of the biggest, maybe the biggest economy in Africa today. They are not at all related. We have a problem. I have been to the Niger Delta, and thanks to Mr. President, I'm a board member at the NDDC. I come from a small place in Taraba State, for instance. The point is that every state in this country, if resources are properly harnessed, every state has the capacity to provide enough for its citizens. Because the oil that we're talking about is an asset that is going to end one day, maybe 30, 40 years. And of course, I do agree that as at the moment, the major effect of the mining of oil is on the immediate communities. There is no doubt about it. But also we have to recognize some facts that Nigeria has evolved. At the present calculations, the revenue that goes to the Niger Delta from the oil, from the federal budget, Ministry of Niger Delta, the NDDC, and all related is about 33%. It's actually not 13%. It's much higher. Yeah, because the money that goes to NDDC, for instance, is not calculated in the revenue in the 13%. It's not part of it. The federal budget and all the projects that take place, including the Ministry of Niger Delta, are not part of the revenues. are not part of the 13%. So it's a little bit high. It's much higher.
How much?
No, let me say. I didn't interrupt you. So you can see that they are uninformed, so to say, and mischievous, and sometimes mischievous extremists on the site. Because why did the revenue formula change over the years? It changed because one of the factors for those who are political students was for the coup in 1966 was that the federal center, the center was too weak. The regions were holding the center to ransom. The weakness of the center led to the wild west, the riots in the west, the Agbekoyas, and some of the problems that we had. So the military came in and adjusted and said, okay, let us have a center that is stronger. And part of the reason why the center needed to be stronger was Niger Delta. The Willings Commission was set up in 1957 to look at the fears of minorities in the north and the south. And one of the areas that was of concern was the area that we now call the Niger Delta. It was called Niger Delta, the south-south. And the reason was that the people did not have the freedom, did not have to express themselves the way they had, because the Eastern region government was dominated by the Igbos, and that created problems for them. You also recall, for those who read, you know that Isaac Adaka Boro, in his book, The 7 Days Revolution, stated that one of the reasons that they had to launch the revolution was that the savior of the Niger Delta had been killed. Who was the savior, you will ask? It is clearly stated that Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who was from the north. Now, still looking at it, as at that time, the colonial authorities looked at the fears and the problems of the Niger Delta and discovered that the Niger Delta poverty level was higher than the national average, and decided to set up, even as at that time, the Niger Delta Development Board to look at the problems of the Niger Delta, because it had serious problems. Now, the Willings Commission came. I also recall that I told you I'm from the north. I'm from the middle belt part of Nigeria. Which you will discover that Jos Plateau was providing tin, columbite, the resources that were generating a lot of revenue to the country. And if you look at the revenue sharing formula at that time, I think the federal government took almost everything. If I'm not, I don't have the data now.
Okay, no. let's look at it now. No, we're talking about that, and the law is saying that based on fiscal needs.
No, just let me conclude, Ma. We cannot be talking about physical need of a particular area. There is no, if you have gone around the country, I've gone around the country, there is no part of the country that educational system is not decaying. There is no part of the country that hospitals are working. There is no part of the country that the roads are good. So the poverty level in the north, I know, is accentuated by the fact of desert encroachment, which is one factor that people aren't talking about. It's not just about revenue. It's about, for instance, the drying up of Lake Chad, that people, what sustains life is being taken away. And we need intervention. The federal government needs to intervene. But because I don't believe that money to the states is, as far as, if you give money to the states, go around Abuja and see what is happening to the state government money. Abuja is one of the biggest construction sites in the world.
Okay, let's bring on Honorable into this talk. Now, Rima has said very clearly that poverty has no boundaries in Nigeria. There's poverty in every region in the country, and of course, rightly so. But the Northern Governors Forum has pegged its argument on the fact that there's more poverty in the north. Now, let's look at, let's consider derivation. They have also said that the offshore oil produced, is not from the Niger Delta. It's not a region, it's not a place owned by, any particular region of the country. So based on that, the allocation should be increased based on the offshore oil produce. What's your take on this?
Well, first and foremost, I want to comment on what you said the chairman of the Northern Governors Forum said. I believe he's right that the northern states needs more money. to cater for the sectors affected, both formal and informal. What the central bank governor said is also true. I want us to look at this from a very objective point of view. I'm coming. Poverty in the north is clearly understood as a problem, a very big social problem. And we need resources to cater for such problems. Just like Rima said, what Tafawa Balewa did to cater for the people of the Niger Delta in terms of understanding, yes, there is a high level of poverty then, right? It's important to have a review of the sharing formula as agreed in the Constitution. Because it's clear, the Constitution has already stated...
Okay, what is agreed in the Constitution?
5 years, every 5 years, there is room for reviewing the revenue allocation formula. This is very important. We are not talking sentiments, we are talking facts, we are talking reality. If the Constitution states that revenue should be reviewed from time to time to meet the realities, changing realities of particular times, just like we have now, then there is no need to argue. In addition, the 13% derivation given to the Niger Delta, first and foremost, you have to look at this. One, all the states get grants. All the local governments get grants. There is NDDC in the Niger Delta. There is Ministry for Niger Delta. All allocated funds for the ministry, the commission, the local government and the states. They go to the people of those regions, not to the people elsewhere. You understand? So it means they have more money for socio-economic development. So there is nothing wrong if the Constitution says after 5 years you can review such sharing formula on the basis of population, land mass, population density, internal generated revenue. There's nothing wrong because they all contribute to the federation account itself.
But Honorable, the worry is that, with the allocation already going to the northern parts of the country, and yet there's little or no development in that part, what is the guarantee that if there is a change in the allocation formula of the country, there's going to be any improvement?
Excuse me. What makes you think with the resources given to the Niger Delta now? I'm not trying to be one-sided, but with the funds given to the Niger Delta states, I believe they ought to do, or they ought to have been much more developed than it is now, right? As much as it is in the north, right? With the resources given so far, yes, there's no need for stating is because of the lack of funds that we do not meet up to our sectoral developments, right? There ought to be prudency. There ought to be prudency in the management of resources.
All right.
This is very important.
Honorable has spoken about management of resources, and some people would argue that ever since the north, like you spoke about the granite pyramids and all the natural resources that are dominant in the north, and which has seemed to have suffered over the time of the incoming of the oil from the pre-colonial times. Now, before anybody can argue about, revenue allocation, let's go back to the issue of Nigeria's federalism, true federalism. Now, we state that fiscal federalism seems to have been, part of Nigeria's constitution until the military came and upturned everything. Let's say we return to it. Let's say we return to that state of federalism. Do you think this would be, this topic we're even discussing now would even arise if that was...
Okay, before I actually go into that, I just want to point out what the honorable member said. I don't know where in the constitution that it is stated that revenue should be reviewed in 5 years. I was wanting to quote a section because we have RAMFAC, and I think RAMFAC is a creation. It's not a creation it's an establishment that was created from the Constitution. And it's not a case of you saying you should review the revenue in terms of land mass.
Okay, Kenny, just a minute. I think the Honorable has that part.
Yes,
let's have him read it to us.
It's very important you read it.
Okay.
All right, Honorable, please, let's have it.
It says under the third...
the section and the particular...
the third schedule, part 1, right? Federal executive bodies establishment by section 153, right, of this third schedule. The Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission shall comprise the following members, right? A chairman and 1 member from each state of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, who in the opinion of the President are persons of unquestionable integrity with the requisite qualification and experience. The Commission shall have power to monitor the accruals to and disbursement of revenue from the Federation account, review from time to time the revenue allocation formula and principles in operation to ensure conformity with changing realities, provided that any revenue formula which had been accepted by an act of the National Assembly shall remain in force for a period of not less than 5 years from the date of commencement of the Act.
All right, so Kenny.
But that's exactly what I was saying. I said RAMFAC and the Act of the National Assembly. But the way he presented it was like a case of, he talked about land mass, he talked about population.
Oh yes. Then
not read it.
Okay. Then I'm coming. I'm coming. I'm coming.
Because when you start talking about land mass and whipping up the sentiments of, we're talking about facts here.
Then
talking about mass and talking about internally generated revenue. IGR has no
public revenue. It says public revenue. Section 162, subsection 2.
Yes.
The President, upon the receipt of advice from the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, shall table before the National Assembly proposals for revenue allocation from the Federation account. And in determining the formula, the National Assembly shall take into account the allocation principles, especially those of population, equality of states, internal revenue generation, land mass, terrain, as well as populations.
Okay, Kenny.
That is your primary constituency, which is the National Assembly. So it is the National Assembly that will decide, and RAMFAC will raise it. Do you understand where I'm coming from? But you're saying review here as if those where the funds are being derived. Do you understand what I'm trying to point out? He's trying to shut out derivation. It is very important you don't shut out derivation. You don't make it silent.
Okay, let's get back to the question.
But let me get back to what you have just said. What you have just said is, yes, you're very correct. I will concur to your position. If we're going to practice true federalism, because notice in America, like in the state of Texas, most times I have asked questions anytime I'm there. I know Texas is almost as big as Nigeria in landmass, just the state of Texas. And their budget is way bigger than Nigeria, just the state of Texas. And I realized that in America, the regional units came together to form the center. And that's why you find the center not very strong. You can have death penalty in Texas, and in California you don't have death penalty. And you have real federalism being practiced in America. But coming back here, what we had then, we were paying 50%.
Okay.
If you remember, we're paying 50%. That is the truth of what was being paid to the center. The center created the state. And so the center became strong. But if I go back to what my colleague here said, he said because of the coup of 1966, there was an edict that Agui Ronsi brought. The edict decided to make the center strong. And that was the reason why he was killed. And we have to be realistic. Even Ishola Williams, who was in the army, clearly said that one of the reasons he was killed was because of that edict, that decree that was promulgated. And after that decree was promulgated, in July, in the counter coup, it was abolished. We all know that. Because we realized that the white man who did that in 1954, the British man who did that in 1954, could have seen the peculiar nature of what we had, that we're going to come to a situation we are here today. Because whether we like it or not, we're all taking regional lines in this debate. Do you understand where I'm coming from? He has supported the statement of Malam Sanusi, which I still think was not responsible for the office he had. But if we're talking about true federalism, Malam Sanusi will not be making the statement he made. Because in this case, from Delta, for example, I will take care of my resources and I will pay tax to the federal government.
All right.
Do you understand? By the time I pay tax to the federal, even if the federal government says I should pay 50% of what I'm earning, I will not be coming to say, please give me 50%. I will not come cap behind to say, give me 20%. It will not be proper. It's like producing MTN recharge cards here, and I don't have cards. I don't have credit on my phone.
Okay.
That's the truth.
Okay, Rima, I'm going to come back to you. Still on federalism, there are arguments that before anybody can begin to talk about revenue allocation, the issue of the nature of Nigeria's federalism should be determined. Now, what is the nature of Nigeria's federalism as we speak?
You see, there are a lot of confusion. There's a lot of heat in Nigeria when people are discussing things, a lot of passion, a lot of heat, and very little light. You see, when people talk about true federalism, there is no federalism anywhere in the world that is true. Countries evolve and decide on the formula and the manner they want to relate with one another. You look at Europe, for instance. The Soviet Union disintegrated, isn't it? In EU was working on bringing countries together. If you look at the studies that have been done on federalism, there are places that people want to come together. There are places that people don't want to be together. All those are part of everything is true federalism because that is what people have decided to be. And then there's this other question that people bring to you and say, there is no true federalism. There is the one physical federalism. We have a decision that evolved. It evolved. I was working at the National Assembly when the National Assembly decided. The National Assembly is dominated, if you want to say that, majority of the members of the National Assembly come from the North. But that National Assembly in 2000 decided to vote to throw out presidential veto and decided that to abolish the offshore and onshore dichotomy as related to the funds that were going to come to the NDDC, for instance. Everything. You see, so it wasn't decided on the basis of region. It was decided on the basis of the cold fact on the ground that Niger Delta issues needed to be addressed. That is one factor I want us to note when we are talking about this. Okay. And then going further on this, I am a board member at the NDDC, and I want to assure you that there isn't enough money to do a tenth of what the NDDC would have liked to do. Presently, let me make a point. Let me make a point. As at the moment, I think we have we need over ₦1 trillion to even complete the existing projects that have been started and cannot go further because the federal government has withheld, because if all the funds that the National Assembly if all the funds that the National Assembly agreed the federal government should give is given to NDDC today, I think the federal government may not be able to perform some functions. So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to discuss dispassionately.
Okay.
And it is not. And the major problem, I've said this on this program, that the major problem we have in this country is not the issue of where I come from, it's the issue of governance.
Indeed.
We have problem of governance. I was talking about Abuja is being a big construction site. Most of the properties that are being developed in Abuja are being developed by private people who don't own any business, who don't own factories, whose only business is that they have access to government resources.
All right, our phone lines are open right now, 0946252207, and of course the number is 0946252207. So please call in and give us your contributions, Rima.
Okay. Yes, so if we, the people of Nigeria, from Niger Delta, I have friends from the Niger Delta that we did students unionism with in the 80s, early 80s. And I keep telling them, let us go. The little money that is given to the Niger Delta states, let us ensure that things are done right in those places. There will be a marked difference.
All
right. If you come to the north too, for instance, my good friend Lamido Sanusi, if they could just cut down on the personal expenditures, I'm sorry to sound personal, that they have, if the governments in the north could be more responsible than they have been, they won't have the mass. We won't have the mass poverty that we have. Admittedly, the further north you go, like Chukwuma Soludo said, these are facts of human index development. The further north you go, the higher the poverty level. That is correct.
Let me hold you on that for a moment. Honorable, you want to say something before I put my question?
What I wanted to say has to do with, like you said, governance. You see, we keep on talking about the oil sector. There's what we were taught, like the primary industry is made up of two major activities, mining and agriculture. We used agriculture during the times of the regions, the governments of the regions, to build up the refineries. You understand? This speaks a lot of having one Nigeria. So getting oil now from the Niger Delta states, as it is now, doesn't mean is outside Nigeria.
Okay.
Is within Nigeria. And bringing in this example, the United Arab Emirates is solely dependent on oil about 20, 30 years ago. Now, what did they make from services is 2-3 times what they make from oil. These are the kind of approaches we need to have. We need to have a true government that has a true plan.
Okay, you've spoken about true government and true plan. I go back to governance. Let's assume that the scrapping or the let's assume that the scrapping of the 13% derivation comes to the table, or the alteration of the 13% derivation comes to the table of the National Assembly, as to speak. Now, tribal and ethnic chauvinism will override nationalism. Why I say that is that the North will push for it in their favor, while the South would go against it or resist it. Now, wouldn't that be the case, as it seems?
It says in the Constitution, right? The 13% derivation cannot, for the Niger Delta, cannot come down below 13%.
It has to go higher.
Even if it must be changed, it must go higher. That is one. But you see, the issue of offshore, the offshore is within the territory of Nigerian waters. It's no man's land. It's every Nigerian's property, right? So what we are saying, whatever comes out from the offshore should be in addition to all the federal, states, and local government.
All right,
not just for the Niger Delta.
All right, Honorable, before you continue, let me just let our viewers know that there seems to be a congestion on the phone line, so we'll advise that some of you should probably drop and let some others be able to call in. When they're done, then you can call back in because of the problem of the congestion. Now, Rima, I want to come back to you on this. You did mention earlier talking about good governance in most parts of the country, most states, particularly the northern states. Now, everyone seems to be talking about the revenue accrued from oil. Nobody seems to be playing up the need to explore the dormant resources in the north, gold, uranium, like we used to have, agriculture and all of this. Now, these are areas where the state governments can, improve the lot of the state internally generated revenue. But we don't see that, we don't see that in most northern parts of the country. What's your take on this? And where do you think that the governors should stand in this debate for more allocation to the north?
Well, you see, the governors are playing politics, in my own opinion, so they will necessarily have to talk about they don't have enough money to justify the non-performance that we have in most of the states of the north. I do not think that the problem of Nigeria is lack of money. A few years down the line, we will discover that we don't have the oil that we have. Are we going to say Nigeria will follow? Nigeria will not follow. There are, like I pointed out from the beginning, there are several countries in the world that depend on some basic things. For instance, the coffee that we have in Mambila Plateau, or that you can grow, coffee Arabicas, yes, that you can produce on the plateau, will be enough to sustain the economy of Plateau State. Agriculture is there. Benue State has enough water resources to produce the fish needs of Nigeria, to produce enough fish. And we cannot even produce the fish needs of Nigeria because of the amount of money, the sheer amount of money that we spend importing fish. The Minister of Agriculture has been talking about trying to improve agriculture. We don't need to import the type of food that we're importing, but we can also reverse. Food production can be reversed in 2-3 years to the extent that we begin to export food. If you look at even a place like Bayelsa, Bayelsa should be producing and exporting plantain and bananas. It does not have to depend on oil, really. If you look at Plateau State can export vegetables. A few years ago, they were exporting flowers from Kenya to Europe. Plateau State can export flowers. It can export fruits. It can the point I'm trying to make is that our leaders need to be more imaginative and to play less of politics. Because the resources, enormous resources that we have, come to think of it, for instance, the budget of Bayelsa State is more than the budget of Ghana, a sovereign country. I hope you know that.
All right. Yeah. All right.
If you look at the budget of a few of the northern states, put them together, they may be well lower than the budgets of the states of the Niger Delta. But put a few states in the north together, Kano, Kaduna, and the rest of them, you have the budgets of some sovereign countries in the world that are doing well and they are not depending on oil. Okay. So what is the problem? We have good people, resourceful people, we have talents, we have enormous resources on the ground. It's our ability to put things together, and that is leadership.
You've spoken about that in next. I'll go to you, Kenny. Now, the leader of the ACN, Bola Tinubu, and Governor Fashola argues that the method or the review of the revenue allocation, the method that is being shared is lopsided. Yes. And it's one-sided. And for them, they feel that for a state, as Kano State, which has 40 local governments, and Lagos State, which has a population, high population density, has 20, they feel that the North is on the right track. Yes. And that for them, they believe that the whole process should be reviewed. And your argument is that perhaps it's unnecessary for them to even get that allocation. What's your take on this?
I haven't said it's unnecessary, but if you look at it, in creation of local governments, Lagos State was shortchanged. Because if you look at the landmass and in terms of population of Lagos and Kano, they run pari passu. So one cannot have 44 and one has 20. And that's why they created the extra local governments that the federal government kicked against. and they turned them to LCDAs. Do you understand?
Yes.
And so the truth of it is that you cannot now allocate funds to those LCDAs. They use their wisdom to distribute their local government's allocation around those areas. That is true governance coming from the wisdom of the governor, and I must compliment that. But be that as it may, I would also want to comment on the issue of continental shelf, which the Honourable talked about, that the offshore, the issue of continental shelf was a dicey issue that went to the Supreme Court, if he remembers very well. And in the wisdom of the center, which was President Obasanjo at that point in time, he wanted to settle this matter outside the Supreme Court, because it's very obvious. You can't tell me that the water around my neighborhood is not part of me. And so they decided to abolish the offshore and onshore dichotomy. And that's what is being resurfaced again. And this is an issue that has been settled amicably, and we thought we had moved on. And we're being taken back to it, because you cannot have water around here and you say, oh, we have 200 kilometers to the continental shelf, 200 meters to the sea, and that is not part of your territory. I don't think it is right. Why didn't you have it up there? And again, from what you have said, what we are saying here, basically, don't get us wrong, we're going on facts. Facts is sacred. What we are saying here is, you're deriving your resources from the oil, from the gas deposits I have in my backyard. And I'm a typical example of someone who comes from a constituency that produces oil. And that's why I'm speaking the way I'm speaking, authoritatively, because I know the sufferings and the yearnings of the people. When they come up here to Abuja and see all those wonderful roads and all the developments that is coming up here, like my colleague here said, is a construction site. They marvel and they wonder, because they wonder if this is the same country we are in. We're saying that, to be fair, to be very fair, like he rightly said, the more you go up, the more. I went to Sokoto during the campaigns. I'd never been to Sokoto, and I was shocked when I saw the airport. I was almost in tears. I didn't believe that this was the same state that had produced a president in 1979. I couldn't believe it. Was like, it was ramshackle. That's to describe what I did see in Sokoto airport. So what we are saying here is, it's not like we don't feel the pains of our northern brothers. Don't get us wrong. But what we are saying here is the fact that you derive the oil from our area, you derive most of the wealth from us. You must give us what is due. And the 13% you're giving us is not enough. You will come to the aspect of management. Yes, in Delta, in rivers and Aquebom, those are typical examples of areas where funds have been utilized very well. In Delta, for example, we're looking at the Delta beyond oil. We're already doing it, because like you rightly said, maybe in 30, 40 years we'll not have oil. Delta beyond oil. And a committee has been put in place to say, look, let's also look at what we can use to actually develop this state without thinking of oil. We had issues. We have cassava, we have palm oil, and these were products that were being exported in the past. What we should say here is that we should come together, put our governors on the check. Let us go back and go to those resources that we're using to sustain ourselves. I've been to Mali. Mali depends on only aid. They don't have anything they export, unlike Abidjan that has cocoa in terms of coffee. But Mali is still surviving. So if Mali can survive, why can't we survive? And we have taxes. Maybe the federal government, by the time we pay taxes to the federal government in its magnanimity will say, look, a state like Sokoto is suffering, a state like Kano is suffering. Okay, let us agree on this percentage you have got in taxes to help them to cushion the effect of the shortfalls they have gotten from their IGR.
All right, Kenny, quite spoken. Honorable, we don't have enough time. Just in two very short sentences, I'll have your last words.
For me, I believe the Fed government should concentrate on two major things now. Okay. Nigeria has oil. Yes, we all know Nigeria has